Welcome back to FPL Therapy, the weekly FPL podcast hosted by me, FPL Raptor, where I'll hopefully guide you through the FPL season and make you laugh along the way because everybody needs a little bit of FPL therapy. Each week we are usually joined by a different guest, but for this episode, I'm solo podding, so it's just going to be me, and I promise it's not because I have no friends. I just think that I would rather save these brilliant guests for a week where we actually have a game week upcoming, and if you didn't know, it is an international break, so there will still be so much value in this podcast, I hope, but there is no guest, so it'll just be me kind of rambling, some of my thoughts about game week 3, early plans, transfers for game week 4, and yeah, just lots and lots of stuff. We'll also start thinking a little bit about wildcard as well. If you are listening on audio, two things for me. Could you please make sure to rate 5-star? It really supports the podcast. But also, can you head over to YouTube and make sure to subscribe as well? We're very close to 10,000 subs. So everyone watching, listening, please consider subscribing. It would massively help. But without further ado, let's get into it. So the rough structure for today, I'm going to go through my team from game week 3, which actually did better than I thought it might, and I was dreading this episode, but it did okay in the end. Then going to go through the games from game week 3, some players and teams that stood out to me, go through my watch list, some of your questions, and then also my team at the end for game week 4 and beyond. So for game week 3, I was dreading this podcast because obviously I don't own Erling Haaland. If you've not listened yet, I went without him at the start of the season, and when he bagged another hat-trick, back-to-back hat-tricks, he's now averaging a hat-trick every 9 games for Man City, which is remarkable. I was looking at my team and thinking, yeah, I've made a huge mistake here because there is no way that Mohamed Salah matches it, and he did exactly that, and he now has 41 points in the opening 3 games, and Haaland has 41 points. So the fact that the two of them are so clear of everyone else and the fact that they have exactly the same number of points is absolutely remarkable. So for those on audio, my team scored 82 points for game week 3. I had Henderson in goal with a 4-pointer, Robinson, Gabriel, and Trent in the back line. Obviously, Robinson got that assist. Trent got the clean sheet once again. That is now 3 clean sheets in a row for Liverpool. The midfield was Rodgers, Eze, Salah, Jota, and Saka. So blanks for Rodgers and a blank for Jota, but returns for Eze, lots of returns for Salah. And also Saka still is yet to blank this season as well. And then the front line was Meniz, who continues to frustrate for me. He came in for Solanke last week. And also Isak with a 9-pointer. Delighted, and when I say delighted, I mean delighted to finally get returns from Eze and Isak. Because lots of people are saying, are you really going to die on that Eze hill? How patient do you want to be with the likes of Eze and Isak? So really delighted that both of those returned. And they actually got full bonus too. But like I said, I was looking at my team, and despite the fact that it did very well for me up until that Liverpool-Man United game, I knew that I needed a miracle from Mohamed Salah to save my week, and that's what he did. And I am a Manchester United fan myself, so it was a little bit conflicting given that I had triple Liverpool and my captain, and Manchester United got destroyed. And I think whilst I would love Manchester United to win, if they are going to lose that badly, I hope it's my FPL players getting the points. And Mohamed Salah against Manchester United is just a joke. The amount of returns, we'll discuss in a second actually, how many returns he's had against Manchester United, because it's ridiculous. And at this stage, you just say it's a fixture that he enjoys, and every time he plays against Man United, he's a good captaincy option. So yeah, outside of that, I think the thing that I was actually really pleased with again is the defence continues to deliver. Because there was only actually 1 clean sheet this game week, but I still managed to get a 4-pointer from Henderson, obviously the assist from Robinson, and the clean sheet from Trent. My defence over the opening 3 has been something that has been really, really nice for my team. So there we go, 82 points overall. We're going to discuss each of the games in more detail in a second, so I won't say any more there. I would love to know, if you're watching on YouTube, how many points did you manage in game week 3? Did you manage to beat my 82? And did anyone manage to get over 100? Because I have seen, without any chips played, a few 100-plus scores if you had the likes of Mbeumo, Salah, and Haaland as well. So overall, delighted, and Salah did absolutely bail me out once again. So like I said, the plan now is to go through each of the games from game week 3, but don't worry, I'm also looking forward. So as I'm reviewing the games, I'll talk about players that I like the look of moving forward, and especially if you are on your wildcard this week, some of the hidden gems that aren't really very highly owned now that I absolutely think are worth having. But an overarching point, as I said, was only 1 clean sheet in game week 3. So I've looked into the data from previous seasons. In the 2022-23 season, we had 5.54 clean sheets per game week on average. So that was the average amount across the season. Last season, in 23-24, that dropped to 4.13. And the reason for that predominantly, we think, is that there was so much added time. But we now know that this season, the Premier League have changed it again with the refereeing, and there will not be as much added time again. So I am probably expecting, so it went from 5.45 per game week to 4.13. I would expect it to probably return back to about 5.45. around that number. Now, in game week 1, we had 6 clean sheets. In game week 2, we had 5. And obviously in game week 3, we've only had the 1 clean sheet. I don't expect there to be that few clean sheets every week. So I would expect it to return. But obviously, if we get this on a consistent basis, the question will become, is it worth investing all the money in the defence? Or do we only invest money into the defences that will keep clean sheets, the likes of Liverpool and Arsenal? So it's something to monitor. And I absolutely will monitor it in every FPL Therapy episode. We'll keep up to date with that. But as of right now, I don't think it's anything to panic about massively. So the first game of the game week was Arsenal-Brighton. This is a very difficult one to analyse because as soon as there is a red card, that massively changes the game. But there are a few things that we can take from it. And I think Bukayo Saka was unbelievable. And if you captain Saka, you can definitely count yourself quite unlucky. He had 1.15 XGI, 4 shots in the box. And I think if you watch the game, he could have come away with 2 or 3 goals. Not even necessarily goals, but goals and assists. So unlucky, but how many times have we said with Saka that he's been unlucky not to come away with more? My concern with him, and this is maybe quite a harsh claim, I don't know that as of now, or if he ever will, have that same killer instinct as Salah and Haaland. You know, when Salah and Haaland get the ball in the 90th minute, they are so desperate to still score goals and to still get assists and to increase the scoreline. And maybe this is on Arteta more than Saka, but I just feel like once Saka gets one return, which is often in the first half, that often kind of is it, and he doesn't get necessarily loads in the second half, and he still gets those chances, don't get me wrong. And last season, he had 2 15-pointers, I think it was 9 double-digit hauls. So he does have the capability to get multiple returns. I just don't ever feel like with him, if he's on 2 goals and an assist, he's not still trying his best to try and get more. Because if you watch the Man City game, Haaland was on a hat-trick, and then he was still trying to score. I remember he started beating the ground because he was so frustrated that he didn't score a 4th goal. Mohamed Salah in his post-match interview said Liverpool could have had 5 or 6 and he wished they'd scored more. That's the kind of mentality that I just don't know if Saka has. And it's why I'm always a little bit uncomfortable captaining him, because I just often feel like you'll get like 6 to 10 points from him. And that is brilliant, by the way. He's still yet to blank in FPL this season. But yeah, a little bit unlucky for captainers, but I do worry that there's some kind of recurring trend there. Like I said, the red card did ruin the game. I would love to know if you're watching on YouTube or on Spotify, by the way, you can comment. Let me know what you think of this red card. Do you think the red card for Declan Rice was justified? I don't want to get into a massive debate here because I could talk about this for about an hour. It was a yellow card, of course, which led to the red card. I don't think, for me, that should be a yellow card. I wouldn't say the game's gone, but it just worries me a bit because, yes, by the letter of the law, if a player delays a restart, that should be a booking. But there was so much more that went into that. Firstly, yes, it was a foul that Declan Rice gave away. And yes, he should have already been on a yellow card, by the way. But then Veltman throws the ball about at least 3 yards further forward than where the free kick should have been taken. It bounces off of Rice's legs because he's thrown it so far forward. Also, after that, obviously, yes, he's trying to go for a restart or take a quick free kick. He's not really trying to do that. He's trying to get Declan Rice in trouble. And also, the ball was still moving, by the way. It bounced off of Rice's heel when the ball was still moving. So, listen, like I said, I don't want to get into a massive debate. For me, I would have liked either, as people have said, you need consistency where every time someone does it, they're booked. Or what I think is more reasonable is just use your common sense. If obviously someone kicks the ball away and the team are taking a quick free kick in the opposition half and it could lead to a goal, then absolutely, in that case, you probably need to book the player. But there, it didn't really feel like he was delaying a restart or he was delaying or stopping Brighton from gaining a massive advantage. So yeah, again, I don't want to get into the debate too much, but for me, I wouldn't have given a book in there, and I would hope that the referees had a bit more common sense. But that did massively change the game. Arsenal still managed to create chances, by the way. 5 big chances in the game. 3 of those were before, but obviously 2 of those were after. So Arsenal was still okay. But big shout out to Brighton, because often teams will go, obviously have 11 men versus 10, and they'll struggle to take advantage of that. We've seen it on so many occasions that sometimes that extra man doesn't translate. But Brighton made the most of it. They had over 20 shots in that game. And after the red card, Arsenal struggled quite a lot without Declan Rice, at least from a defensive perspective, and Brighton created plenty of chances. I do think that João Pedro looks fantastic. The minutes look good. The data's good. We think he's still on penalties. João Pedro, for me, is probably in the top 3 to 5 players that I would target for Game Week 4. We know that they have Ipswich at home and Forest at home in Game Week 4 and 5. So yeah, João Pedro for me looks like a brilliant pick. And those minutes in particular just look so secure at the moment. He's also not going on international duty. Lots of the players we'll discuss today it's fantastic that João Pedro's not. So he's not away with Brazil. So he should get a nice rest and he should be available from Game Week 4 onwards. So that's great. I do still think Mitoma and Minte are going to be great options. But for me, if you had all of the structure and flexibility in the world, I still think at the moment you are probably looking to go for a João Pedro rather than a Matoma or Minte. Again, if you have that available in your team. The only other player that I thought was interesting is actually Lewis Dunk. He created the most chances in the game out of all players for both teams with 3. I think all 3 of them, or at least 2 of them, were post-red card. And obviously, Arsenal had to drop a bit deeper. Brighton dominated the ball. But definitely there is something to be said that Lewis Dunk in this Hertzler system will create chances, and we already know that he is fantastic from set pieces. I would argue that he's probably in my top 3 favourite sub £5 million defenders at the moment, Lewis Dunk. So again, if you're on a wild card and you're looking to load up on 2 or 3 £4.5 million defenders, Lewis Dunk would absolutely be there. I would just say, though, Brighton's fixtures after game week 4 and 5 do start to turn a little bit. So it's not like they have a really nice spell of long, good fixtures. It really is just Ipswich and Forest at home in 4 and 5. So maybe you would need to make sure that he rotates well with another defender. But overall, it is relatively difficult to analyse the Arsenal-Brighton game, just simply because that red card changed it massively. And I think, as good as Brighton are, and they would still create chances, I think probably Arsenal were maybe on for a clean sheet there, and maybe it could have been sort of 2-3-0. So probably silly from Declan Rice to get involved, but that one decision did massively change the game. So that's my thoughts on Arsenal-Brighton. Brentford, Southampton. Lots of people went for Mbeumo this week, and I spoke about him extremely highly on the episode of FPL Therapy last week. We just love Bryan Mbeumo. He is fantastic when he plays. His data's good. He's talismanic. He's on penalties. He takes the odd set piece as well. What is there to dislike about him? I don't even think he's a poor finisher. There was obviously, it wasn't last season, the season before. If you've been playing FPL for a while, Mbeumo hit the crossbar, hit the woodwork like 9 times in one season. I don't think he's a bad finisher either, which is fantastic. So he'll get chances and he'll take them. And he's just dominating, along with Wissa, the amount of chances that Brentford get. And that's what you want. If Brentford score, Mbeumo is very likely to be involved. But even if you ignore FPL for a second, Brentford's press was exceptional. Southampton liked to play out from the back, and they were very naive in doing so. But Brentford just suffocated them. The way that they did that was remarkable. And I think it was, despite Southampton being one of the weaker teams in the Premier League, I still think it was a very good performance from Brentford. And overall, I'm certainly looking at Brentford assets coming up. The issue that we've got with Brentford assets is that their fixtures aren't very good in 4 and 5. They play against Manchester City and Spurs away. But from game week 6, which is a very popular wildcard window, I would imagine that lots of people will start looking at Brentford assets. And I myself would be extremely surprised if I don't have at least Mbeumo in my team. He had 2 big chances, by the way, and created 2 big chances himself. So he was involved in 4 big chances in game week 3. And again, there is a Southampton factor. However, I still think that Mbeumo will be good, especially when the fixtures do improve. But one player that still doesn't get the credit he deserves is actually Yohan Wissa. So he's a very nice price point, obviously more expensive than someone like a João Pedro, but still a very cheap forward. And he's just taking so many shots and getting so many chances. And I said that Mbeumo is normally involved in Brentford's goals. It kind of feels like the same with Wissa at the moment. When you look at the underlying data for the Brentford assets, in terms of, is there a large share of who's getting the chances? There's not. A team like, maybe even like an Arsenal, the chances are often spread around Trossard, Martinelli, Saka, Ødegaard, Havertz. Lots of players getting chances. Brentford, it just doesn't happen. It's literally just Wissa and Mbeumo at the moment. So Wissa had 6 shots in total, with 4 of those being in the box in game week 3. That was the highest number of shots joint with 2 other players in game week 3. So if you're looking for a cheap forward, and maybe you don't want to take a punt on João Pedro, or you've already got him, I would say Wissa is probably my second favourite forward at the moment to own in FPL at that cheaper price. Obviously, I'd like to own Erling Haaland, but Wissa is definitely worth considering. It's just about, are you happy still playing him in the 2 more difficult fixtures coming up, especially against City, obviously, this week? Or can you rotate him with someone else? Is he like an 8th attacker in your team? But definitely consider Yohan Wissa. I might even have, if I do wildcard in game week 6, Mbeumo and Wissa as a double up. I wouldn't even mind that, because Brentford will create chances. And without Tony there, it's going to be the 2 of them. The only other note is probably the fact that obviously Southampton did score. It was a great finish, I think, from Sugawara. It was an excellent finish. And to be honest, maybe Brentford slightly unlucky not to get the clean sheet. I still think for me, Flecken is the standout cheap goalkeeper. If I were wildcarding at the moment, Emi Martinez stands out due to the fixtures. Obviously, David Raya, from game week 6 onwards, the fixtures are great, and Arsenal are very good. Alisson could even be a shout. But if you do want to go for a cheaper price, I struggle to look past Flecken for me. Maybe you could argue like a Verbruggen could do well as well, but for me, Flecken's the standout. Makes loads of saves. Brentford are okay defensively. I know they've conceded a lot of chances, but their opening 2 fixtures were not particularly good, especially obviously playing against Liverpool. So Flecken's got everything that I would want from a goalkeeper, and he still is the standout for me. So if you own him, I'd still be feeling pretty happy there. So yeah, Brentford very impressive, Southampton very disappointing. Not much more to say there, but Southampton definitely looks like a fixture to target from Game Week 4 and beyond. The next game was Everton-Bournemouth. This is, what a game, by the way. I can't wrap my head around this. So I was making notes. I often make notes during the games whilst I'm watching stuff for these FPL Therapy episodes. By the way, if you do enjoy them, again, make sure to subscribe, make sure to rate 5-star. I spend hours over the weekend making notes for these episodes, and I'd already got my notes ready. Everton looked brilliant. They were really, really solid. I watched the extended highlights. I had some of it on in the background as well, and they just looked brilliant. Over the opening 80 to 85 minutes, it looked like the Everton of old. They limited Bournemouth to only 1 shot on target in the opening 85 minutes. So by all accounts, it was a really good performance from Everton. And also going forward, the likes of Calvert-Lewin and McNeil were brilliant. And then I don't really know what happened. They just capitulated. And if you don't know who I am in terms of my own personal background, I've already done a master's degree in sports psychology, and I'm currently doing a PhD and lecturing in sports psychology as well. So I've got a long background in sports psych. And momentum shifts are something that we actually look at as sports psychologists. The reasoning for it, we're actually still not sure. Like, what causes these shifts in momentum? Because Everton was so dominant, Bournemouth scored 1 goal, and then you can see on the faces, I mean, Sean Dyche commented post-game that Everton's heads just went. They conceded a goal, and I don't even think the first goal Everton could have done much about. It was an exceptionally good cross, and it was a decent finish, and that happens in football. You concede goals, but from there, you would normally expect a Sean Dyche team and Everton in the past to just shore up defensively. They just fell apart, and Bournemouth obviously gained that confidence. But in the opening 86 minutes, Everton had 8 shots on target, Bournemouth only 1. In the final 10, Everton 0. Bournemouth had 6 shots on target in the final 10 minutes. And obviously they scored 3 of them. I don't know how to analyse this or take it away, because what I want to say is Everton looked much better, but then you can't say that about a team that's conceded 7 goals in the first 2 games and then concedes a further 3 in the final 10 minutes of the third one. I do want to say, though, McNeil and Calvert-Lewin did look very good. McNeil was creating a lot of chances. I'm not sure I would necessarily pick him now ahead of other options. Like, I'd probably rather a Minte, even a Smith Rowe and Rodgers, I'd still probably rather. But do keep an eye on him. Probably the player that I'm most interested in, again, another cheap forward, is Calvert-Lewin. Now, would I prefer him over a João Pedro or a Wissa? Probably not. But is he a cheeky option from Game Week 5? So the fixtures from Game Week 5, Leicester, Palace, Newcastle, Ipswich, Fulham, 3 of those being at home. Don't overlook Calvert-Lewin. The issue with Calvert-Lewin is never is he a good option. He's always a good option. I truly believe that, because he's data strong and he has that natural instinct of just being in the right place at the right time. He's a very talismanic player. He'll get involved in a high quantity of the team's goals, and he should have penalties. And his minutes are actually very good when he plays. The issue with Calvert-Lewin is his fitness. So if his fitness can hold up, I always think he's a decent option, especially when you look at the run of fixtures that they have coming up. So let's assess how Everton get on in Game Week 4 against Aston Villa. But if they look okay, and maybe they limit the chances that Aston Villa create, and then they score a couple of goals themselves, then maybe we do look at some of their assets. But I also think Bournemouth are worth talking about. And Semenyo once again on the score sheet. I'm quite happy with our track record on FPL Therapy to date, because last week again, we spoke about Semenyo in detail. Going into Game Week 3, he had the highest shots on target in the league over the opening 2 games. He also had the highest non-penalty expected goal involvement. And once again, he gets on the score sheet, and he's just getting into some really good positions. Even with their new striker, Eva Nilsson, playing, Semenyo's still getting the chances. So another player that at that sort of £5.5 million price range, I really like Semenyo. It's just the next 2 fixtures. I think it's Chelsea and Liverpool. I mean, could they score goals? Absolutely. But I wouldn't want to bring in an asset that's about to play Chelsea and Liverpool. I think both of them are, one of them's at home, one of them's away. But from 6 and 7, they then have Southampton and Leicester. So again, on a Game Week 6 wildcard or with your transfers, I'd absolutely like to own Semenyo for Southampton and Leicester. But then it's followed up by Arsenal and Villa. So annoyingly, Brighton and Bournemouth are 2 teams that I would like to buy their assets, and they have 2 good fixtures coming up at different points, but they are surrounded by very difficult ones. So do you want to jump on an asset like Semenyo with difficult fixtures either side of 2 very good ones? Maybe. I think it also depends on, can you rotate that player in your team? But regardless, Semenyo standing out. I do think Eva Nilsson at points will be very good for Bournemouth too. And yeah, I've got my eye on some of their assets, but I'm not sure. It doesn't really suit my strategy and style of play to go out there and buy a Semenyo ahead of two pretty tricky fixtures. But overall, yeah, I was actually really impressed with Bournemouth in the final 10 minutes. But before that, they didn't really manage to create much against Everton. Let me know what you think of that game, by the way, because it was absolutely bonkers. I just don't know what to make of it. By the way, if you didn't watch Match of the Day, it was the shortest amount of time required to get a comeback from being 2 goals down. I didn't word that perfectly, but essentially to overturn a 2-goal deficit and to win the game, I think like 85 minutes was when the first goal went in. That is the shortest amount of time required to do it. Before that, it was like the 81st minute that the team scored their first goal. So remarkable, really. And you're not going to see that many times in Premier League history. The next game was Ipswich-Fulham. I was really interested to see this because Fulham in the first two, for me, have been very disappointing. And Ipswich, I saw some really good signs against Liverpool and City. And I know they conceded a lot of goals. They didn't get many chances. But I think Ipswich are being massively disrespected. They are a team that I don't think will be awful defensively. Let me reword that. I don't think they'll be like the worst defence in the league. I still think they'll be bottom half of the table comfortably. But people are talking about them like they're awful. They've just played Man City and Liverpool. And against Fulham, they didn't give them that many chances. And they've come away with a draw. So let's not jump to conclusions and just assume because a few seasons ago they were playing in League One that they're going to be terrible. I think they've been okay. And I think Kieran McKenna is a top manager. And the thing is, we often confuse, I don't really care if they get relegated from an FPL perspective. What I care about is, are the assets getting points? Yes, Ipswich could get relegated, but Davis could get 10 assists. Yes, they could get relegated, but Schmodix might score 10 goals. It doesn't really matter if the team are winning or not. What matters is, are the FPL players getting points? And I think Davis in particular absolutely could. For me, I'm going to go out there and put a pretty strong statement out and say if I was looking for a £4.5 million defender at the moment on wildcard, I think Davis would be my first choice, really. I think he's that good going forward. And we've spoken about that clean sheets aren't that common, especially if you look outside of Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City. So if clean sheets aren't going to be that common, why not back a really attacking defender? And people are going out there and saying the likes of, why would you not go for Robinson, playing for a better defence and also very attacking? Firstly, I don't know that Fulham are a much better defence than Ipswich. Last season, they were 14th for expected goals conceded, so towards the bottom. Over the opening 3 weeks, they haven't looked particularly strong defensively. I do think they limited Ipswich largely, but also, I know I've just said Ipswich could be good. It is Ipswich. So I don't think we look at Fulham now and say they're a great defence. And whilst Robinson has got into some really good positions, and I know he's got 2 assists, I own Robinson myself. I've owned him since game week 1, and I'm delighted with those assists. Those 2 assists were from 0.1 expected assist. So he's not created a lot of high-quality chances. That actually puts him, for just defenders and looking at just expected assists, that puts Robinson 19th for defenders in terms of creativity. So yes, the 2 assists are great, but perhaps quite fortunate. And past points don't indicate future points, right? That is not the most representative thing of what's going to happen in the future. And I look at Leif Davis, and I think his attacking threat, for me, looks better than Robinson at the moment. If I don't think either of them keep many clean sheets, especially, by the way, with the fixtures that Ipswich have coming up, listen, I think Leif Davis is a great option, but Robinson also is absolutely fine. I wouldn't go out there and sell Robinson, but as I look at it, if I was choosing fresh now, Leif Davis, I mean, he had 5 entries into the box, which was the highest in that game for all Ipswich players in game week 3. He's just getting into some great positions. So for me, yeah, Leif Davis would be in my wildcard team. Outside of that, Smith Rowe was largely anonymous, and we've seen this pretty much every game so far. I know he did get the goal and the 10-pointer in game week 2. Sadly, I don't think Smith Rowe in the position that he's playing right now is a brilliant FPL option. I wouldn't, again, go out and sell. He's got a good home game in game week 4 against West Ham, but he's dropping a little bit too deep. He's responsible largely, along with Andres, for progressing the ball. And whilst he's had some really good performances, and if you speak to Fulham fans, they'll be very impressed. And each week he's getting more minutes. There are loads of advantages to Smith Rowe. I don't want him, from an FPL perspective, to be progressing the ball. I want him to be on the end of the ball after it's been progressed, right? I don't want him dropping deep and being responsible for bringing the ball forward. So it's not great from an FPL perspective. Do I still think he'll get returns? Absolutely. I 100% do. But he's not like Cole Palmer from last year. You're not going to get multiple returns a game on a consistent basis because he's just not getting into the positions to create and to score goals on a regular basis. He'll get 1 or 2 a game maybe, but then you're relying on him absolutely returning every chance he gets, which he just won't do. No one will do that. You need a higher quantity as well as a high quality. And for me, Smith Rowe's just not quite getting that. A player that is getting a high quantity and quality of chances is actually Moniz, who is so frustrating. I mean, again, I myself own Moniz. He missed another big chance in game week 3. That is now 3 big chances missed in the last 2 games. He's also had more shots again in the box. And this is a difficult one, and it's kind of a conversation that I wanted to have. How long do you give a player that is underperforming? Right? And this is a question I would love to throw out to you. Does anyone have like a formula in place or just a thought process in terms of you've got a player in your team that is getting chances, but they're not getting returns? How long do you continue to give them? So the way that I approach this is, firstly, I need to make sure that my player is getting the chances, because you might watch a game, a player might look good, they might be a good player, they might be getting good minutes, but even if they've got good fixtures, if they're not accumulating the chances, then for me, I don't want them. And the way that I worked out is data. And whilst a lot of people don't like expected data, for me, it is the best objective measure of, is my player getting a high quantity and or quality of chances themselves, and are they creating chances for others? So my first port of call always, if I'm trying to work out if I need to sell a player, is, are they getting the chances? So I first look at data. After I've looked at data, I then watch the games, because data does not tell you everything. And I am a very analytical manager, but I would hate to over-rely on data. So after I've said, so Menez, let's look at that. He's had 3 big chances. He's getting the chances. His XG looks good. Great. I then go and watch extended highlights of the Fulham games. And for me, Menez, I don't think he's a bad finisher, but he is snatching at his chances a little bit. And also, there's been a couple of good saves for some of these big chances. So when I watch, it's not like I watch the games and think Menez isn't getting very involved. Yes, he's had a couple of chances, but he's a poor finisher. He's not taking them. I think overall, he looks like he's not particularly confident. Therefore, I want to sell him. I look at it and think, he looks fairly confident. He's getting the chances. Yes, he snatched at a couple of them, but we saw last year he's also a very decent finisher. If he gets enough opportunities, I would expect him to take them. So I guess my approach to this is I look at the data, and after I've looked at the data, it's then more of an eye test approach. But I would love to know how you approach it. As a result, if those are my strategies, I look at the data, it's good. I look at the eye test, i.e. I watch the games, and I'm still relatively impressed. And is his minutes still good? Well, yeah. Raul Jimenez is coming on every single game for Menez. And also, Raul Jimenez is looking good himself. So could I see Raul Jimenez come on in the 60th minute one game? Yeah, I could. And could I see Raul Jimenez start a game? Potentially, but I think you could also see them start together, especially if they continue to struggle to create chances. So I know that was a bit rambly. Honestly, I don't really know. But when I look at Menez, I don't see him with West Ham at home in game week 4, with the amount of chances he's getting and still decent minutes. I don't see him as a massive issue now. But even game week 4, once again, he fails to convert. There does become a point where the patience runs out. Again, if we go back to psychology, there's something called sunk cost fallacy, where you've had a player for so long, you've owned them, you've invested time into them, and you feel like you've got to keep them in the hope that they'll eventually return on that investment. It's not just FPL that this occurs with, but we don't want to fall victim to sunk cost fallacy. If Menez is not going to score me goals, I don't want him. So there we go. If you're a Menez owner, hopefully that helps. As of right now, I think I'm going to keep him for at least one more week. He just doesn't seem like a priority transfer to me. So listen, Ipswich, Fulham, 1-1. I was expecting more from Fulham, but Ipswich were okay. And I definitely think, don't disrespect them moving forward. They've got some good fixtures coming up. Leicester Villa, another interesting game, and one that, again, I was actually disappointed with the away side. I expected Villa to show what they're all about in this game. And whilst they probably did deserve the win and they created their chances, it still wasn't overly convincing, was it? I mean, to beat Leicester 2-1, you would expect more from Villa. They're a Champions League side. They finished 4th last season. So, yeah, I would have expected more. Watkins missed his 3rd big chance in the space of 2 weeks. I think, and I say this as someone that loves Darwin Nunez, by the way, and I owned him last season, I still think getting big chances is great. And I look at this as an overall net positive, that Watkins is getting so many big chances. And that's what Unai Emery said as well. He's not too fussed at the moment that Watkins is missing the chances, because he's getting them. As I said with Menez, there does become a point, if Watkins continues to miss them, maybe something's going on. And Unai Emery did point to the fact last week that actually Watkins was struggling with a minor injury when he came back to Villa. He didn't say anything about him still struggling, but the big issue for me with Watkins isn't the misses, it's the minutes. So he got 64, 61, 64 minutes. He has not yet played 65 minutes. And not only is he not getting the minutes, but Duran looks very, very good. So my concern would not be that he's missing chances. That happens with every player. Every player goes through that dry spell. It's the minutes and it's how good Duran looks. And with the Champions League coming up, you could bet that Ollie Watkins is first choice in the Champions League. If he has to play 90 minutes in a Champions League game, or 70, 80 minutes, could you see Duran start a slightly easier Premier League game? Absolutely, you could. So my feeling with Watkins now is you can't sell Watkins with the fixtures they've got coming up. If you've gone out there and bought him, you absolutely don't sell him. But would you go out there and buy Watkins now? I'm not so sure. I don't look at Watkins now and think when the likes of PALMER, Haaland, and Salah are out there, and there are other really good options that you can go and buy, I don't see Watkins as a player that I would like to rush in. But if you own him, I just don't see the value in selling him either, unless we see something over the international break which suggests that he is struggling with an injury and he might not start in Game Week 4. Otherwise, I would probably keep. The other player that obviously lots of people were worried about is Rodgers. I just think, like, lower your expectations. He's a 5.2 million pound midfielder. What more do you want from him apart from he's creating chances and he's getting a few himself? Again, he's created 2 big chances for Ollie Watkins in the last 2 weeks. Watkins of last season finishes both of those. And in that situation, we are looking at a sub £5.5 million midfielder that has got 2 assists in 2 weeks, one of which was against Arsenal. So it's fine margins in FPL. And no, his data isn't exceptional, but what you're getting with Rodgers is really good minutes, good fixtures, and he is creating chances. So yeah, I just think temper your expectations with what you want from Rodgers. This does drive home the point, though. Like, if you think back to my team, I have 7 attackers, and Rodgers is one of them. And when I say 7 attackers, my 8th is a £4.5 million forward. So I can only start 7 attackers every week. I don't like that. And when we move on to my transfer plans, you'll see, I don't like the idea of having to start a £5 million midfielder every week. Right? They're at that price for a reason. I would like the ability to rotate them out. So what this probably drives home for me is if you're sat there with quite a few cheap attackers in your team, maybe try and make sure that you've got 8 so that each week, if a player's not performing and not getting the returns, you can substitute them out potentially. So yeah, I look at that and I think that you probably want to try and have 8 attackers if possible. So moving on to Forest versus Wolves. Obviously 1-1 was the end result. Forest are actually unbeaten so far this season, but do remember their opening 3 fixtures, right? They've not been the most difficult fixtures. So I'm seeing many people point to their defensive data and saying this is a reason to obviously maybe not captain Salah or go out there and not buy a Liverpool asset. They've had very easy fixtures overall. And whilst, yes, they are unbeaten, I would still look at it and think you would expect Liverpool to put goals past his team. However, last season, their defensive data was strong. So maybe they are just a pretty good defence. And maybe it's not a fixture to target. And I don't think I've seen anything thus far to suggest that it is. But also, they've not played a particularly tricky opponent. So I would just be careful there that you don't get carried away with how good Forest defence have looked. But something to keep an eye on. And if they do limit Liverpool, who have so far shown they are so good going forward, then absolutely they're a team we will look at, but maybe not obviously this week. You won't want to bring in or really start a Forest defender against Liverpool. Chris Wood, I've given a lot of stick to recently, and that is not a wood stick pun, but I've just been a little bit harsh on him overall. I've been saying that he's a bit of a tap-in merchant, and I've not been impressed by his performances. He was much better in Game Week 3, so to give him credit, that was a much better overall performance. He had 5 shots in the box, which was the joint highest in the league for Game Week 3. So he's just a proper goal scorer. He'll get high-quality chances, and usually he'll take them. He had a goal ruled out, which was only about a yard offside. So overall, I think if you've got Wood, you could absolutely keep him, maybe bench him this week because you wouldn't want to start him. And then maybe look to start him from Game Week 5 onwards. I do just worry, though, because I still don't think his minutes are perfect. And I do wonder if they'll eventually give Aouanier a start in the Prem. But as of right now, the minutes have been good enough. The returns have been there. It's difficult to say that he's a bad option. I kind of feel like if you've got him, you can keep him. Now is probably not the moment I'd go out and buy Chris Wood. I'd probably still rather a João Pedro or a Johan Wissa myself, or even maybe a Calvert-Lewin if he can stay fit. Gibbs-White was probably unlucky not to come away with something once again. 3 key passes, a chance created, 0.7 expected assist. Gibbs-White continues to look like a really solid option. So I have absolutely no issues if you want to go out there and grab yourself a Gibbs-White. I will just say, Wolves look like a team to target. If you look at the results, you watch them, they look a bit all over the place defensively. They're not quite clicking. So I was getting the data together for this video to try and say, yes, Wolves are absolutely a team to target. They've only conceded 4 XG this season in 3 games, which isn't great, but not bad. And that puts them as the 9th best defence. And we speak about fixtures. They've played against Liverpool and they've played against Arsenal and they've played against Chelsea, I believe, over the opening 2. So obviously the Forest game wasn't a difficult one, but that just goes to show that they're probably not as bad. They're not giving up as many high-quality chances as people are suggesting. So, listen, I do think that Wolves is probably a fixture that you're happy having a player against. I think it's Newcastle next week, right? So the likes of Isak could do very well, Gordon. But I'm not seeing Wolves based on the data, and this is why data can be useful as a team that are necessarily a team that I desperately want to target. Like, I would probably say someone like a Southampton would be a better fixture for me at the moment. But let's keep our eye on it. If that data starts to decrease slowly and they become a bottom 5 or a bottom 6 defence, then maybe I change my opinion. But as of now, listen, we don't want to go out and invest in Wolves assets, but I don't think they've been horrible. That maybe that 6-2 result against Chelsea was a little bit harsh, although they were pretty poor defensively, I guess. The next game was Manchester City versus West Ham. Again, I went into this without Erling Haaland. It was actually my anniversary with my girlfriend. So I went out for dinner and I was like, can we just not check the football? Of course she checked the football because she's an FPL manager and she loves football. And I was just like, oh, I'm having a great evening. At least I don't know how bad it is with respect to Erling Haaland. And I just saw this look on her face. I just saw this look on her face as if, no, you're in trouble. And I was like, oh no, what's happened? So I checked, and this was at half time. He'd already scored 2 goals. And I just want to say, he's just ridiculous. I said last week, and I stand by, in fact, it reinforced it, something looks different about Haaland this year. And this is when we then get rid of data. Ignore the data for a second. He just looks lean. He looks fit. He looks sharp. He looks confident. It's always worrying when a player doesn't even celebrate when they score. He's just got this little smirk on his face as if to say, I can do this every single week. And will he do this every week? No. He's on track for 88 goals in the Premier League this season. He's not scoring 88 goals in a season. It's crazy. He's getting 2.33 goals per game. So, what does this mean? Haaland is absolutely as close as you can get to a player that is essential in FPL, yes. But he's not going to continue getting 7 goals every 3 games. So, what you now have to think if you don't have Haaland is, I've missed those points. I am not gaining those 7 goals back. Over the upcoming games, is he going to continue at that rate? No. Will he still get goals? Yes, absolutely. So it's about how many you think he'll get. Is it worth breaking your team or wildcarding to get him in? And it comes down to your own decision at that point. He's only accumulated 3.62 XG in the opening 7, and 0.8 of that is a penalty. So if you take that away, he's sat on about a 2.4 to 2.6 XG over the opening 3. So he'll always overperform his expected data because he's a brilliant finisher, but he is overperforming at a stupid rate at the moment, over 100% overperformance. You might say that you want to jump on an asset that's performing at that level whilst they're on a hot run, but for me now, I just look at it instead and think, he's not going to carry on at that rate. I myself am still looking at bringing him in, and we'll discuss my team a bit later, but I don't think you need to desperately go out because in Game Week 4, they play against Brentford at home. That's a great fixture. But then in Game Week 5, they play against Arsenal. And in Game Week 6, it's Newcastle. I don't think Brentford, Arsenal, Newcastle are 3 great fixtures that you want to go out there and really target. So let me know what you think about Haaland. As someone that doesn't own him, I'm definitely looking at routes to him. But I don't feel desperate to go out there and break my team, especially when Salah, for 2.5 million less, by the way, has matched him on points. No one's talking about how essential Salah is. Why is that? He's got the same amount of points. So it's an interesting one. The only other discussion I wanted to have was around Rico Lewis and Gvardiol. Rico Lewis just looks much better than Gvardiol for, what is it, like 1.5 million pound cheaper at the moment. I wouldn't want Gvardiol based on what we're seeing, but Walker will, you would assume, eventually come back in at right back. And as soon as Walker comes back in at right back, Gvardiol has to be the more attacking fullback. Unless Pep wants to continue, because what we're seeing at the moment is Man City are almost playing like a diamond in midfield, where Rico Lewis is like a right-sided midfielder. I don't think that Gvardiol can play that role perfectly on the left-hand side. It's different to what we saw Gvardiol do last season. So if that's the case, maybe Rico Lewis just continues to play. And if he does, not only does that make Gvardiol for me nowhere near the best £6 million defender, I would rather Gabriel, I'd rather Saliba, I'd rather Robertson. I might even prefer a Van Dijk eventually if Liverpool continue to defend well. But it means that Rico Lewis is brilliant option at 4.6, 4.7 million, depending on when you're watching this. So, yeah, 18 touches in the box over the opening 3 games for Rico Lewis, 7 touches in the box for Gvardiol. So, as of now, Gvardiol's not worth it. Rico Lewis absolutely is. But after the international break, could we see Walker come back in? Yes, which removes Rico Lewis as an option and also makes Gvardiol much better. So, it could flip very quickly. Let's see what Pep says maybe in his press conference after the international break. Let's see whether it looks likely that Walker might start or if we get any leaks. And if we do, then I think we have to start adjusting our thought process there. I do think KDB owners were very unlucky. He actually had the joint most shots in Game Week 3 with 6. So very unlucky. I mean, he hit the woodwork at least once. He forced a good save out of the goalkeeper. Overall, KDB could have come away with a lot more there. I still don't think I still prefer Saka. I still prefer Palmer. I still maybe even prefer like a Son. For me, KDB's never been my favourite FPL asset because his goal threat tends to be quite low. His assist threat is great, yes, but I would prefer goals. And also, he's not on penalties. And he also doesn't take all set pieces. So for me, KDB, you are relying on him scoring a long shot or getting a lot of assists. So that's, for me, always the reason that I've not been overly keen on KDB. But I think you were very unlucky. And listen, West Ham had their chances. Man City are not that tight defensively. We've said this for a few seasons. They find a way to concede chances. And what they usually concede is they usually concede big chances. They might only concede 1 or 2 chances in a game, but those chances are often massive ones. And West Ham had plenty of chances. Kudus looked really good once again. I think when the fixtures improve for West Ham, and they will improve soon, Kudus is definitely a player that I would look at, and so is Jared Bowen to some extent. He will consistently return. He's shown that over a few seasons. But yeah, Kudus is one to keep an eye on, but for now, I'm still not overly interested in West Ham. But yeah, Erling Haaland, what an incredible player. And I don't want to talk down his achievements, by the way. He's now averaging, a hat-trick every 9 games for Man City, which is absolutely bonkers. So yeah, brilliant player. I just don't think you have to break your team desperately if you've got a Mohamed Salah in there, because I think he's a fine captain for game week 4. The other game, Chelsea Crystal Palace. Again, very difficult one to know how to analyse this. It was a bit end-to-end in a similar way to, as we'll discuss in a second, Newcastle Spurs. But I thought Chelsea were very impressive, especially going forward. They are very clearly a team that are going to create a lot of chances. We saw that against Wolves. We saw that again against Palace. I think for a second game in a row, I've been highly impressed by the way that Maresca has set them up and the chances that they've created. They find a way, even if the defence looks good, they just find a way to create chances, whether that be getting in behind or whether it be Palmer getting into that number 10 role. So overall, really impressed from an attacking perspective, but they just don't finish well their chances. And they've got a lot of players in their team that are prone to missing chances. Madueke was exceptional once again. He had 2 huge chances from a similar position to where he had his chances from against Wolves, by the way. So he had 2 big chances, but it's one thing getting the chances, you need to finish them. And we've seen in Madueke's career thus far, he's not an elite finisher. In fact, he often does miss chances. So Madueke's minutes were good. His chances were great. It's just about, and we said this with a lot of players, are they going to finish the chances they get? But I do still like Madueke. Maybe last week, if I'm talking about where I'm wrong often in content, and by the way, I'm wrong quite a lot, Madueke was maybe a player that I overlooked a little bit too much. But let's see what happens, obviously, from Game Week 4 onwards. For now, he's not a player that I'm desperate to go out there and get. A player that I would really like to go out and get is actually Jackson, who I thought was really good once again. His minutes, I would argue, right now, are maybe the most secure out of any Chelsea attacker outside of Cole Palmer, who obviously is so much more expensive. And he's not that much. I think he's currently at 7.6 million, Jackson. So I myself, in my team, I could get Jackson for free as my 8th attacker. I could do Cannon to Jackson, and we'll discuss my transfer plans a bit later in this podcast. But that is a real option for me because I do kind of want a Chelsea attacker, given how well they're attacking. And whilst I could do something like Saka to Palmer instead, going out there and getting a Jackson doesn't feel bad. And the minutes are good. He had 1.34 XG against Palace. My only concern is actually Nkunku and Felix can still play as the 9. Right? I don't think neither of them are really natural 9s. And Chelsea didn't go out and sign a natural 9, which makes me think that Jackson will be favoured. But once the European competition kicks in, the Europa Conference League, could it be that Jackson's preferred slightly there? Could his minutes in the Prem start to slowly drop a little bit? Could you see Nkunku and Felix start with Palmer on the right and even chucking Madueke out on the left? You could see that, absolutely. Or Pedro Neto on the left. They've still got a lot of attackers. And that's not even discussing the new signing, Jadon Sancho. So I just worry with Chelsea that they've still got so many options in terms of how they can play. Do I want to go out there and I've just sold Nkunku? Do I want to go out there and get a Jackson who could suffer the same fate of being benched in the Prem? I don't know. But as of right now, I'm very interested in Jackson. And obviously, Cole Palmer is brilliant. But it's just about, like, can you afford him? And if you can, do you still have Haaland and Salah? Because if you don't have Haaland and Salah, even though they are obviously much more expensive than Palmer, I'd probably rather prioritise Haaland and Salah a little bit more. Like, especially if you're a Haaland owner listening to this, if you've got Haaland but no Salah, and you've got enough to get a premium midfielder in, could you find that extra 2 mil to go from Palmer to Salah? I just think Salah is still a better option for me. We will discuss in a little bit more detail Palmer and Salah in a second, but it's very close. And for that 2 million saving, it could be worth it. I just think that Salah is that guy for me. And then Eze was really good once again. I found it interesting that finally Eze returns, but actually it was his poorest performance in terms of the quality of chances. He didn't even accumulate 0.4 XGI, whereas in the previous 2 games before that, he had numerous chances and created numerous himself. It just goes to show that patience does often pay off. We spoke about earlier, how long should you be patient with a player? Eze was always a player I was going to be patient with. The fixtures were good, the data's good, the eye test's good, the minutes are brilliant, he should be on penalties, he's on set pieces. What more do you want from an asset? He's just brilliant, Eze. So I really, really love him. And absolutely, he's got Leicester at home next week. I'm not going to be selling him. Henderson's another player that I own that a lot of people do. He almost prevented 2 expected goals on target. So his goalkeeping saved Palace in that game. He was brilliant. Now, will clean sheets be coming anytime soon? Doesn't look like it based on how Palace are defending. But as long as he's making saves, I can deal with it. And Leicester at home again in Game Week 4 is a lovely fixture. So very happy to have those 2 for next week. But beyond that, maybe I start to look to offload the Palace players. So 2 more games before we then obviously move on to a bit of a discussion around fixtures, watch list, and also your questions as well. Newcastle Spurs, the very definition of an end-to-end game, and it always is between these two. I'll be honest, I don't think Newcastle deserved this win, but I also don't think that Spurs can say they were hard done by. They didn't finish their chances, and that's often the case with them. And also, Newcastle did finish their chances. But yeah, I think Spurs will be gutted that they didn't get more from the game, or at least a draw. In terms of FPL, Son started the game as a left winger, and we do know that traditionally his creativity is best off the left, but his goal threat is best through the centre. So it was Son through the middle, Kulusevski is the 9. At half-time, Brennan Johnson came on. Kulusevski was pushed to the 10. Johnson obviously went on to the wing, and Son was put through the centre. I do think, once again, he looked better through the centre, but he also just didn't really do much from an FPL perspective. This is a game against Newcastle, an end-to-end game with counter-attacks that you would expect someone like Son to be very good for, and he just didn't quite deliver. And with the likes of Saka and Palmer at the moment, and obviously he's got Arsenal this week, I don't blame you if you're looking to maybe move Son on. From Game Week 5 onwards, though, the fixtures are okay. So could you hold Son? Could he do something against Arsenal? Without Declan Rice, absolutely. Spurs could score a couple of goals there. But I still think that for me, Salah, Palmer and Saka are all ahead of Son in the pecking order. So if you've got no other issues to sort out in your team, or you want to free up some funds, by the way, and drop to someone like an Mberma, you could consider doing so. But just try and, I would say, target the fixtures as much as possible. So maybe a Brighton mid would be the one I'd go for if you're looking to try to free up some funds to move elsewhere. Gordon, by the way, was absolutely brilliant once again, but maybe not from an FPL perspective. He was dropping a little bit deeper than I've seen in the past. Also getting to more central positions. Whether he was on the left or on the right, he was playing a little bit more centrally, which I liked. But equally, I think you could potentially want more from him in terms of the positions that he's getting into for FPL. Porro took loads of shots. He had the joint most shots in Game Week 3 out of all players, 6. So along with KDB and someone we discussed earlier, 6 shots in Game Week 3. It's a lot of shots. And he was on my bench for Game Week 3. I'm delighted he didn't get anything. It feels quite uncomfortable benching him. I think Porro will get a lot of goals this season. I think he'll get at least 1 deflected goal. He takes a lot of shots from the edge of the box. He doesn't really care if there's players in front of him. So often those shots will get blocked. But at some point, he'll get a deflected goal from outside the box. And he's basically an attacker. I don't even care for the clean sheets. He's just getting into some ridiculous positions. So very happy to have Porro. I suppose the only other player that needs discussing in this game is Isak. He was, I won't say rubbish. That's actually really harsh. He wasn't particularly good, once again. Didn't really get into the game. And again, I'm typing up notes during the games for FPL Therapy. I'd already typed out a couple of sentences saying, Isak might be a sell now. Newcastle just can't get him into the game. And then, obviously, Murphy breaks through, who was very good when he came on, by the way, cuts the ball back to Isak, and Isak has a tap in. This is what good forwards do. They get into the good positions. But yeah, I would be lying if I'm not slightly worried about Isak, because Newcastle aren't finding ways to feed him. But as of right now, I still think he's fine to keep. So yeah, Newcastle Spurs very unlucky, or maybe should have had better finishing and they could have come away with a lot more in that game. And then Man United Liverpool. So I am a Man United fan that owned Salah, Jota and Trent with Salah captain. So I had no idea how to feel before the game and after the game. Lots of people saying if you're a true Manchester United fan, you'd want Liverpool players to all blank and United to win 10-0. Obviously, in an ideal world, Manchester United score 50 goals and my Liverpool players score 49 and I'm first in the world and Man United win. But that's not always the case. And I try to approach this in an objective manner. I know that Liverpool are a much better team than Man United. And I know that the way that we structure our team against them, with the quality that Liverpool have, especially getting in behind, they are just devastating against Manchester United. Salah in particular is just so good. And it's not a coincidence that he continues to do this. So I've got some stats here. Firstly, Salah has 127 points in 14 appearances against Manchester United. He's averaging over 9 points per game. On 2 occasions, he scored over 20 points against Manchester United. It's just remarkable. And I think it's largely because we never have a left-back fit against, or usually we'd have a left-back fit against Liverpool, but we just don't seem to know how to play against them. They are just fantastic, especially at Old Trafford. It's embarrassing. I get embarrassed before the game's even started. So Salah's brilliant. And I just want to say on Salah, his creativity at the moment is unbelievable from the wing, and his overall performance is so strong. It's not just that he's getting attacking returns. The performances are there to match as well, and he just looks so fit and sharp, and everything just looks so elegant. He's just brilliant. He's one of my favourite players of all time to own in FPL. And I mean, watching him in that game, and I obviously was watching very closely because he's my captain and because I'm a United fan, he was just brilliant. And something that I wanted to say in general was around midfielders. So Haaland has 7 goals in the opening 3 games. Salah has 3 goals, 3 assists, and they have the same number of points. Haaland has 4 more goals and 1 more return in total, but they have the same points. And the reason for that is the extra point for a goal for a midfielder and the extra point for a clean sheet. And obviously, Salah has 3 goals, so 3 extra points there, and 3 clean sheets, so 3 extra points there. So it's an extra 6 points just from that alone. And he's also very good for bonus points, Salah, because he's creating so much. He's getting those shots on target. He's winning fouls. Salah at the moment is really, really good for the bonus point system. So overall, yeah, I was really, really impressed with Salah and Liverpool. Another player that I was extremely impressed with is actually Luis Diaz, who, again, I did not give enough credit to. I just think that I was always worried that Jota's minutes might be a bit more secure. And as an FPL asset, Jota is more clinical. He is usually more of a goal threat. But again, I'll hold my hands up. I was wrong on this. Luis Diaz is now the 2nd top scoring midfielder in the game. If you're looking at points per million, he is the best midfielder in the game. So, do I recommend him? Well, if he continues to start, yes. The issue that we've got is between game week 4 and 5, the UCL will start back up again. And obviously, when that happens, could it be that Diaz is preferred in the Champions League and Gakpo is preferred in the Prem? It could be. I also think what is more likely is it might be that Gakpo and Darwin are favoured in the Champions League, which might leave Diaz and Jota's minutes very, very strong. They've also signed Chiesa. Now, Chiesa could be back up for Salah. It could be Champions League. Again, we don't really know. I guess all of that to say, I still don't know how secure the likes of Diaz and Jota's minutes are. But overall, I would still feel pretty happy owning them. Do you want to go out and buy a Luis Diaz now? My concern would actually be the international break. So Colombia play, I don't have the dates to hand. I probably should have had this. It's like around the 10th or the 11th. And then Liverpool play only a few days later. Also, it's a qualifier. Could I see a situation where Diaz gets very good minutes over the international break and therefore Gakpo potentially starts ahead of him in game week 4? Yes. So definitely don't go out and buy Diaz now. Let's see how many minutes he gets for Colombia. Let's see what Slot says. I almost said Klopp then. What Slot says once Liverpool return, all the players are back for the press conference. But yes, Diaz is great. I still think Jota's great, by the way. I'm just a little bit hesitant with minutes, especially given the international break. Robertson looked great once again, more minutes than Trent. I still think Robbo is the standout £6 million defender at the moment. So for me, Trent and Robertson as a double up is still super strong. Trent himself, still brilliant. He had a goal disallowed by a matter of inches in terms of the offside. He could be, at this point, on 3 or 4 attacking returns as well as the clean sheets. I still think Trent for me is the standout defender, even when you take into account price. And listen, Liverpool do look great defensively. They're the only team to keep 3 clean sheets out of the opening 3 games, but they did concede 1.4 XG in game week 3. Xerxes missed 2 humongous chances. Liverpool should have conceded. So I still think Liverpool are great defensively. I still would like a second Liverpool defender in all honesty, but do just think if Manchester United had better finishers and Xerxes, there was a header from about 2 yards out, I don't know how he didn't score it, then all of a sudden we're saying, yeah, they're good defensively, but they conceded to Manchester United, right? That would be the narrative. So, yeah, let's see how they get on in game week 4 and 5. And if they do continue to defend well, I would look at someone like Konate as being a really, really good option. I would look at him and say, 5 million, looks like he's starting ahead of Quansah. As long as the Champions League doesn't change the amount of minutes he gets in the Prem, you're looking at a very cheap route into one of the best defences in the league. So, very impressed with Liverpool, not very impressed with Manchester United. Try and have 3 Liverpool and try and have 0 Man United. If you do own Bruno Fernandes, by the way, I wouldn't panic. He's got Southampton next week, which is a brilliant fixture. He's still on pens. The minutes are still good. I know he's a frustrating own, but you can't sell Bruno Fernandes for me before Southampton. After Southampton, yeah, bin him off. Get rid of him, absolutely. But this is not the week to be selling him, I don't think. So there we go. We've got all of the games analysed there. So next thing I wanted to look at was actually the fixtures. I don't want to do this in too much detail because we've already started to speak about it. But on your screen, if you're watching on YouTube, and again, if you are watching at this point, you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. We're trying to hit 10K subscribers. And if you're listening on audio, make sure to rate 5-star. But yeah, we've got some fixture swings coming up, and there are definitely teams that we want to target. Arsenal are an interesting one because they've got Spurs and City in the next 2, but after that, they've got Leicester and Southampton at home back-to-back. This is why so many people are looking at a game week 6 wildcard, because if you don't have Arsenal, you've only got 1 or 2, you're going to want 3 for Leicester, Southampton, and Bournemouth in 6, 7, 8. but you might not want them for 4 and 5. So something you could do right now is Saka to Palmer or Saka to Salah. Sell Gabriel as well, because yes, they might keep a clean sheet in the next 2, and Saka will still probably get returns, but how many in comparison to other players? And then just wildcard them back in. I like it as a strategy. I have no issue with it. And I myself am looking at maybe doing something similar. But equally, could you hold your Arsenal assets through and then look to wildcard in game week 8 or maybe game week 12? You absolutely could do that as well. So I don't think you have to rush out and sell them, but do beware. Arsenal have back-to-back tricky away games now, and then they go into really strong home games. So you need to think about what your strategy is with Arsenal. Chelsea's fixtures over the next 4 still look really good. So they've got Bournemouth, West Ham, Brighton, Forest. It is 2 away games followed by 2 home games. So maybe in an ideal world, they would be rotated and you'd have the 2 home games straight away. But they are 4 games in which you would expect Chelsea to still score goals. So this right now is still a very good entry point for me if you're looking for a Chelsea asset. Crystal Palace are another interesting team in terms of fixtures because they've got Leicester at home this week. You're not going to want to go out and probably sell them this week. And to be honest, Manchester United and Everton after that, you could absolutely see them still getting returns. But this is probably the final week for a lot of us, I think, with Palace assets. If Eze looks really good once again, I'll be tempted to keep him. And I might not necessarily want to make a goalkeeper transfer, but I think if you are on a wild card, you're not having more than one Palace. You might have Eze, you're probably not having Henderson. And I think it's the right point soon, not this week, but soon, to start thinking about jumping off Palace assets because overall, they've not been particularly impressive. A team that I've spoken about a lot already, Ipswich, just look at their fixtures they've got coming up. Brighton, Southampton, Villa, West Ham, Everton. As a 5, it's not bad. And maybe if you're looking for an 8th attacker or a cheap defender, a Leif Davis, a Greaves, Schmodix, some of these players will become worthwhile having, I do think. Maybe I'm overhyping Ipswich a little bit, but I still think they've got some good FPL assets. And again, try to remember, dissociate how good Ipswich are in terms of the points that they're picking up with do they have good FPL assets? That's the most important thing for me. Liverpool, now is the time. I think with the 2 home games that they've got coming up against Forest and Bournemouth, they're not bad defences that they're playing, but they are back-to-back home games. They're so good at Anfield. And given how well they've done over the opening 3, if you've not got 2+ Liverpool assets, I'd want them. Like I've seen some people sat there with just Trent. I wouldn't feel comfortable with that right now. I'd want a Robertson. I'd want a Salah. I'd want a Jota or a Diaz. Even a Van Dijk or a Konate. I think try and get, if you can, 3 Liverpool assets. Don't break your teams to do it. As I said, don't break your team to get a Haaland in. But definitely look at trying to load up on Liverpool. I don't think the same applies to Man City, and it's not because I've got 0 in my team. It's not that bias. It's just Brentford, Arsenal, Newcastle. They're not as good as Forest, Bournemouth, Wolves is for Liverpool. So right now, I know this sounds crazy, and we're going to discuss wildcard more next week. We have a brilliant guest on, and we'll discuss wildcard in a lot of detail. If I were to only have one of Salah and Haaland, I would rather Salah. The same amount of points as Haaland in the opening 3, cheaper and better fixtures. So I would rather, but you can absolutely squeeze both in, which would probably be my recommendation. But yeah, I would say Liverpool more so than Man City for me now are probably the team to target for fixtures. And then the only other point is maybe around Newcastle. They do have 2 okay fixtures here. They've got Wolves and Fulham. We've spoken about throughout this episode, Wolves and Fulham aren't bad teams in terms of targeting the defences against, targeting the fixtures. But I also don't think, I think you can essentially get away with either selling or keeping your Newcastle assets. I don't think this is an awful exit point overall. Wolves away and Fulham away. I'd expect them to score goals and they might keep a clean sheet, but it doesn't feel like you're selling them ahead of brilliant fixtures. Loads of people are pointing to how bad Wolves have been, but if you were listening earlier in the episode, they've not been as bad as people are suggesting in terms of defensive data. So yeah, it feels like an okay exit point for Newcastle, but if you want to hang on to an Isak or a Gordon for a little bit longer, don't feel like you have to sell them. But from game week 7 onwards, maybe 6, 7 onwards, that's around the time I'd be looking to offload your Newcastle assets. So there you go. You can see the fixture on your screen. Obviously, feel free to have a look at that yourself. But those are some of the sort of players and teams that I am looking at. Going on with the same trend, here's my watch list for game week 4 and beyond. And obviously, these aren't the only players I'm considering, but I wanted to just narrow it down so I'm not discussing like 60 players in this section. And this is my watch list based on the team that you saw at the start. So I have Salah, I have Jota, I have Trent. Therefore, I've only got 1 Liverpool player here. And really, as much as I love someone like a Luis Diaz, I'm not going to go out there and do that because I've already got triple Liverpool. So bear in mind that this is my own watch list. But in terms of defenders, Robertson and Lewis stand out to me because they are playing for 2 good defences. And I don't expect lots of clean sheets. And whilst I love Davis, by the way, I spoke about Leif Davis being a brilliant option. It's more on a wild card. I don't know that I would go out there and buy an Ipswich player with my one free transfer. But on a wild card, I'd absolutely have him. Lewis does feel like he has the upside. And because I'm not on a wild card this week, and I have the wild card in the back pocket, and I have 0 Man City assets at the moment, going out there and buying Lewis feels low risk because I can fix the mistake on wildcard if it is a mistake. And if I decide I want a Haaland, I can get Haaland and Lewis and still have a third slot open. So for me, going out and getting Lewis isn't a massive risk. It's just, do I want to use a valuable free transfer on a player that I don't know if he'll start every game? And also, again, the fixtures aren't great. This week, yeah, it's not a bad fixture against Brentford at home, but Brentford have been creating chances, as we spoke about. Then it's Arsenal and Newcastle. So I don't mind Lewis, but I'm probably not going to go out there and grab him. Robertson, if I had a third Liverpool slot open, then I absolutely would go out there and grab him. But for me, I have triple Liverpool covered with Salah, Jota and Trent. The midfield is certainly a place that I am more interested. I've got 5 midfielders on my watch list at the moment, which is Mbeumo, Palmer, Semenyo, Matoma and Minte. On the Brighton assets, we know why I want them. They've got Ipswich and Nottingham Forest at home in the next 2. Both at home is a massive advantage. The data's been good. They've both got attacking returns already, and they're both at really nice price points. I can get either of these quite comfortably into my team because I have 3.5 in the bank as well. So I look at this and think, yes, the fixtures from 6 onwards aren't great, but I might wildcard in 6. And also they're so cheap, I can rotate them in and out of my team. So I look at the Brighton assets, brilliant. Semenyo and Mbeumo, the fixtures aren't great over the next couple. So I just wonder, does it make more sense for me, again, someone that's not wildcarding this week, to just have players with better fixtures over the next few and then look to target Mbeumo and Semenyo when the fixtures really improve in game week 6? That's more the strategy that I'm probably going with at the moment. On Cole Palmer, very, very, very decent chance that he comes into my team. But I think for me, it would be either selling Saka or Jota. And I don't love either of those. Jota in particular, unless something happens over the international break that makes me think his minutes will be very low, I don't feel comfortable selling him across the next 2. I think he's still been very good, despite Diaz outscoring him. And Saka just never feels good selling. I mean, he's not blanked yet. He's got a really decent number of points, but so has Palmer. And you just feel like with the next 2 fixtures, I would much rather own Palmer than Saka. If I was in a wild card, I'd maybe try to squeeze both in, but there's no way I would have Saka ahead of Palmer. And therefore, if I've got a free transfer to do Saka to Palmer, could that be a decent strategy? And then that would probably force me into a game week 6 wildcard because I would want to then bring Saka in along with more Arsenal assets in game week 6. So the possibility is there for Palmer. It's just about how willing am I to lose Saka. The 3 forwards are arguably the positions that I'm most likely to change around in my team. So I've got Menez and Isak at the moment. And I just look at this and I think Haaland, so my watch list is Haaland, João Pedro and Jackson. Haaland is an obvious one. It would require a -4, but I can do Saka and Isak to Matoma and Haaland. I mean, let me know in the comments, for a -4, would you prefer Saka and Isak plus 4 points or Matoma and Haaland, obviously minus the 4 points? I'd probably captain Haaland. So if I think Haaland is just about a slightly better option for captaincy than Salah, but it's not, I don't think it's a massive difference. But if I do think Haaland is a slightly better captain, and I'm getting a Brighton attacker, and I'm losing 2 assets that don't have the best fixtures, maybe I could do it. But then I am selling 2 penalty takers with great data that are talismanic. That at the start of the season, Isak and Saka didn't leave a single draft for me. And now I'm considering selling them for a -4 hit. It does feel a little bit knee-jerky to just try and desperately get Haaland in. 2 players that I can bring in for free for my 8th attacker. So to remind you, I've got Cannon as a £4.5 million forward. I have £3.5 million in the bank. Something that I could do is bring in João Pedro or Jackson as my 8th attacker. I can afford both of those because I'd have up to 8 million to spend. That would give me a bit of a benching headache, but it also just improves my squad depth. So I am considering both João Pedro and Jackson. I'd probably be more likely to go João Pedro because overall the next 2 fixtures are slightly better and he's on penalties. And I also think, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think he might even be more nailed as well. So I think putting that all together, João Pedro stands out, but I've been very impressed by Jackson. And I think his minutes will continue to be pretty good. So there we go. Just to recap, if you're listening on audio, my current watch list is Robertson, Lewis, Mbeumo, Palmer, Semenyo, Matoma, Minte, Haaland, João Pedro, Jackson. Very interested in all of those players. At the end, I'll recap my team and talk about what is most likely in my own team. The only other thing to do then is I just wanted to answer some of your own questions that just didn't fit in quite with the the fixtures, or sorry, the games from Game Week 3 and that kind of discussion. So there were just some general questions that you guys wanted to know. And if you want to ask more questions in the future, make sure to follow FPL Therapy on all socials, because I'll often ask for questions over on Instagram or on Twitter. By the way, we're posting loads of clips on Instagram and TikTok as well. So if you're enjoying this and you want a little bit more FPL Therapy, do check us out on all socials. But the first question is, do price changes still occur during the international break? And are early transfers an awful idea, even if to keep team value high? So firstly, yes, price changes do occur, but by the time you're watching this, they'll slow down massively because people switch off. The only time that price changes occur is when transfers occur. And over time, the more you get into the international break, less transfers occur. So I'll often see people say, I'm going to wildcard because I want to catch all of those price changes in the international break. There have been, in the first couple of days, a lot of price changes, but that will slow down massively. By kind of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there'll be very few price changes because people aren't making many transfers in their team. So are early transfers an awful idea? They're not, but you kind of missed the boat. By the time you're listening and watching, it's at a point where there probably aren't going to be many price changes to catch, I suppose. But yeah, for future, I don't mind the idea of wildcarding and getting early price changes, but the more we get in, the less there are. A question that I got from a few different people is kind of what constitutes a team needing a wildcard? Because we've spoken about that Game Week 4 is one of my favourite wildcard windows. I love wildcarding this week. I think it's a great choice. But lots of people are considering it and they're not really sure what justifies it. Like, how do they decide whether to hit the button? There's a few things. Number one is, how many issues do you have in your team? So ignore the fact that you might want to get a Haaland and a Salah, you want a Palmer. Ignore these shiny new toys and ignore the players that you want to bring in. How many issues do you currently have? Because if you're sat there with Barco, Hall, Quansah, maybe you've got like 1 or 2 United assets you want to remove. You've only got 1 Liverpool. If you're sat there looking at your team and thinking, there are a lot of issues, just wildcard. It's not too early. It's a great window to do it. You have the international break to tinker. I love it. I think there are fixture swings. We already have 3 game weeks of data. We do have enough to go off. I really do like this as a wildcard window. So don't fight it if your team needs it. The other thing to think about is also, do you want to restructure your team in terms of those big premiums? And how difficult is that for you to do? Because I would like to restructure my team. I'd quite like Haaland. But because I have 3.5 in the bank and therefore it only requires 2 transfers, for a -4 hit, I can essentially restructure my team and get myself into a Salah and Haaland draft. If you're sat there with Salah and no Haaland, you desperately want Haaland and you feel like you need to restructure, but you don't have the money in the bank. And even if you sell like a Saka and Isak, you have to use 3 transfers to do it, and it's looking at a -8 hit. Well, then, yeah, you're probably needing to wildcard because you're trying to restructure the whole team. I will just say, because you can now roll transfers through the wildcard, the value and importance of playing the wildcard at the right point is much lower than in previous seasons. Because if you've got 2 or 3 transfers and you decide to play your wildcard and you get it a bit wrong, by game week 5, you'll have 3 free transfers. By game week 6, you'll have 4. Like, you can fix a wildcard if it doesn't go perfectly as well. So yeah, I don't have an issue with the wildcard this week. In fact, I really like it. If I had 3 or 4 more issues in my team to fix, in terms of, if think about mine, if I had like Barco rather than Greaves, if I had Hall rather than Robinson, and if I had maybe, if I didn't have Salah and I desperately wanted to get him in, then I might look at it and think, yeah, a wildcard might be justified. But for me, I'm not even close because I don't have enough issues and I can restructure fairly easily. The next question was about how I feel about selling Saka for the likes of Palmer and Salah. We kind of did discuss that. I don't mind it, but I also don't feel like you have to sell Saka. And who do I prefer out of the 2? I did say I would readdress this. So for me, having looked at everything, fixtures, data, minutes, eye test, all of the above, Salah just is a better option than Palmer, and I think he always will be. Or at least for the coming season, I just prefer Salah to Palmer. Better data, minutes are very similar, also on penalties, and fixtures, for the next 2, I prefer Salah's fixtures. So, straight up, I prefer Salah to Palmer, but it's not straight up because there's 2 million difference between them, and it depends what you can do with that 2 million. If that 2 million allows you to keep Isak or Saka and instead sell like a Menez or a Smith Rowe, well then, yeah, as a combination, maybe you prefer the Palmer one. I just think I'd prefer Salah. So I'm going to try and not sit on the fence and just say I would rather Salah than Palmer, but if it destroys your team too much, Palmer is absolutely a fine option, and I myself am still looking at bringing Palmer in. Would you be willing to buy the likes of Robertson or Diaz if it blocks Salah due to triple Liverpool? And this is a fantastic question that is always difficult to decide. So let's say you're sat there with Trent and Jota and you're thinking, I'd quite like a Robbo and I've got the funds to do so, or I'd quite like to do like Gordon to Luis Diaz, but that stops me from getting Salah. I have absolutely no issue with this as long as you are willing to either wildcard to fix it soon, or you know that you won't knee-jerk if he does really well in Game Week 4. Because I think in Game Week 5, Salah's the best captaincy option against Bournemouth at home. So if Salah goes and gets 2 goals again in Game Week 4, are you then going to want to break your team? And if you are, that's fine, but you have to be willing to accept you're probably going to have to wildcard in a week that I don't think Game Week 5 is a great week to wildcard. I much prefer 6 in terms of kind of fixture swings. So this is something you have to think about. If you have the wildcard in the back pocket, I don't have as much of an issue in terms of blocking the 3rd Liverpool slot and not having Salah, because in their own right, Robertson, Diaz, Jota, Trent, Soberslide, Van Dijk, Kanate, they're all really good options. So yeah, no major issue with it, but just be willing to wildcard soon if Salah continues to do very well. So what is the best structure? I mean, this is the question, isn't it? Right now, if on wildcard, do you own Salah? Do you own Haaland? Do you own both? Or do you own neither? For me, I look at it right now, and I think if you are happy to trust some of the cheaper assets, such as Minte, João Pedro, Rodgers, I would have both. And the reason I say that is maybe it's not optimal. Maybe you could squeeze out more expected value from your team if you went for one of them. But I just think in terms of the psychological comfort of just owning the 2 best assets in the game, not knowing one of these weeks, one of the 2 will blank. I can promise you they're not going to carry on like this. And the other one could absolutely smash it in that week. I just think for now, if you're in a position where you are on the wild card, I'd want both of them. The issue is if you do that and you want a Palmer and maybe you want a Trent, the rest of your team looks shocking. And you do have to remember, if you're on a wild card, in Game Week 6, you're going to want Saka. You're going to want Gabriel. You're probably going to want Havertz or Saliba. You're also going to want other assets. Maybe Heung-min Son starts to creep back into the picture, as does Solanke when their fixtures improve. You can't own everyone. So if you have Haaland and Salah, you're sacrificing elsewhere, and you have to accept that. And to be honest, if you go for Haaland and Salah now, you're probably selling one of them in a few weeks because you are going to want to get Saka back in. You're going to want to get Arsenal defence. So I think what I would do, if it was me, probably, but I'll discuss wildcard in more detail maybe next week with the episode with our guest, is I'd probably start with Salah and Haaland, and I would just be willing to accept that one of them will be sold in Game Week 6 or Game Week 7 to spread the funds. And the good thing is, if you start with both of them on a wildcard, you can decide in a few weeks which one. It could be that I don't think this would ever happen, but across the next 3 weeks, Haaland gets 1 goal and Salah gets 5, then you're probably looking at it and saying, wow, Salah is actually just so much better for cheaper. Or equally, Salah might drop off a little bit, get a couple of assists, look okay, and Haaland continues to bang in the goals, then you can make that decision. So I just feel like you're starting from a position of strength if you have both, but you do have to sacrifice elsewhere, so it's how willing you are to do with that. I did have one more question. I don't want to discuss this in loads of detail, and you can skip forward a minute or two if you don't want to listen to this, but someone said more of a personal question for you. How do you deal with lots of others blaming your videos for them doing poorly, leading to some hate/abuse? Even if you try to ignore it, I'm sure it must affect you in some way. I'll be honest, Saturday, whilst I said it was my anniversary with my girlfriend and I had an absolutely beautiful evening, I struggled a little bit mentally. My mental health was struggling, and I'm happy to admit that. And lots of people are, oh my God, how can you let a fantasy game affect your mental health? I think that's absolutely fair enough, because it's something that we pour a lot of our heart and attention and time into. Any hobby that you put loads of time into and it doesn't go your way, you're not going to be feeling great about that. Like golf. If you spend a lot of time practicing golf and you go and play golf and you play terribly, it can make you feel very sad, very anxious, very angry. And that's kind of natural. So don't let anyone tell you that having negative mental health in relation to FPL is silly or stupid. I've seen so many horrible comments on social media. And yeah, I absolutely received so much abuse, I'll be honest, on Saturday, because I told lots of people they didn't need Haaland. And I didn't want to be like the pioneer of the no Haaland draft. I didn't mean for it to be that way. And a lot of people either copy or are heavily inspired by my team. So yeah, on Saturday, I received it a lot. And I will honestly say I didn't deal with it perfectly. But what I try to remember is it genuinely does reflect the other people more than it reflects you when you receive hate. I saw a brilliant tweet, and it was actually on Saturday, and it really helped. Someone said, and this does sound a bit elitist, but I'll just give you the kind of general consensus of what it was. They said, no one successful and truly happy is ever giving you hate in your comments. And I just thought, that is so true. You are not going to see someone that is really happy with their life and truly successful sitting there and sending hate comments to content creators or telling other people they're silly for having poor mental health in relation to something they truly care about. So it reflects more on them. Than they must be in a really bad point in their life for them to send that hate and abuse. And then what I feel is empathy, because that's what you should feel. If someone feels that negative about what's going on in their life, that they feel the need to drop that hate, well, then I feel sorry for them, because I don't want anyone to feel that way. So that's what I try and do, but it's easier said than done. And overall, I want everyone to be happy. I want everyone to get their points and everyone to enjoy FPL, but it's not going to be that way every week. But yeah, that's the kind of approach that I try to have. But I'll be completely candid with you. It is difficult, but that is part of the job. I'm not going to sit here after so many of you watch my videos and love the content, and thank you so much if you do, and say, oh, it's a really negative. Of course, it's part and parcel of being out there online. And I'm happy to accept that. But yeah, try to think twice, I guess. If you are someone that sent really negative comments, borderline abuse or hate to a content creator, and you've done that in the past, just think we are human. I can't predict the future any better than you, and I'm just trying to do my best to entertain. So yeah, I did want to address it because it was quite a lot. I'm not going to complain, but yeah, that's the kind of way that I try to approach it. So there we go. The only final thing to do then is to talk about my team for Game Week 4, and I've spoken about it in a lot of detail, so I won't repeat too much. But my team for Game Week 4, for those of you listening on audio, is Henderson, Robinson, Gabriel, Trent. So Henderson against Leicester at home is really nice. In fact, most of my team's playing at home this week, which is nice. Robinson against West Ham at home, Trent against Forest at home, and Gabriel against Spurs away. I then have Porro on the bench and Greaves on the bench. There is part of me that wants to play Porro instead of Gabriel in the defence, just because I expect without Rice in the team, they'll be weaker defensively. If I expect Spurs to score, which as of right now I would predict they will, why not play the more attacking players? So there is part of me that's tempted to play Porro, but I also think don't underestimate Arsenal defence, that I am kind of tempted to just play Gabriel. But anyway, yeah, defence, Henderson, Robinson, Gabriel, Trent. The midfield is Rodgers, Eze, Salah, Jota, and Saka. 4 of those being at home. Obviously, Saka the only away game. Salah will have my armband unless I go out and buy Haaland, in which case I'll be very tempted to captain him. And then my front 2 is Menez against West Ham and Isak against Wolves. I would say, and obviously Cannon on the bench is a £4.5 million forward. I would say that the weakest part of my team is my forward line. Because if I was on a wild card this week, I'd probably have Haaland and João Pedro. And if those are the 2 that I would have, then obviously Muniz and Isak aren't fantastic. But also, they're getting chances. They will score goals. Now, I don't have a huge issue with it. You don't need your team to look perfect on paper every week. This is something that I always try to reinforce. Sometimes your team will look not so perfect and it will perform really well. Sometimes it will look amazing and it will perform really poorly. So could Menez and Isak get returns? Absolutely. And I don't see either of them as huge issues. So to recap my possible transfer plans at this very early stage, and I'll talk about this in more detail next week. The first is Operation Get Haaland, which would require a -4, and it's Saka and Isak to Matoma or Minte and Haaland. So it's a -4 hit to bring in a Brighton midfielder for Saka and Haaland for Isak. I don't hate it, but I also don't love it because I'm selling 2 very good assets and I have to take a hit. The other option I've got is go out there and get PALMER, which I could just do for free, Saka to PALMER, which objectively feels like already a slightly better move. I prefer PALMER to Saka. It doesn't require a hit, and I have the money in the bank, and that would still give me more money in the bank for the week after. So that is absolutely an option for me. Beyond that is just trying to get a Brighton attacker in, and the only other way I can see that is doing Cannon to João Pedro, which I really like. Again, in isolation, I prefer João Pedro to Minte and Matoma. So Cannon to João Pedro would give me 8 attackers, so it would immediately improve my squad depth. I'd still have a lot of money in the bank, by the way. I'd probably still have over 2 million in the bank, which would be fantastic. But then it does give me a slight benching headache, because this week, if I do that move, I have to bench Rodgers against Everton or Menez against West Ham. Right now, I think I'd probably bench Rodgers, which I don't have an issue with, right? I did say that Rodgers is a squad player for us. He shouldn't be starting every week, or at least you shouldn't be expecting massive returns. But Everton have conceded 10 goals in the opening 3 games. So I kind of like the idea of starting Rodgers. So is it worth me using a transfer to bench a good asset? So I suppose I could roll. It feels very passive, though. And I think I'm probably least likely at the moment to roll. I kind of want to get aggressive with my transfers. Lots of people keep rolling, and that is a very good, viable strategy. But if everyone's rolling, could I use this opportunity to be a bit more aggressive? So I would love to know, if you're watching this, out of those options, what do you prefer? Getting Haaland in at the expense of Saka and Isak, getting PALMER in at the expense of Saka, or getting João Pedro in at the expense of Cannon, which means a benching headache, but also a little bit more squad depth. At the moment, if the deadline was tomorrow, I think I would just about favour Cannon to João Pedro and bench Rodgers, then the Haaland move, then the Saka to PALMER move. But that could definitely change over the coming week or so, and I'll update you on my FPL Raptor YouTube videos and also on next week's episode of FPL Therapy. So guys, there we go. That was a very different experience for me to do that pod alone, but hopefully it was still useful. If you're listening at this point and you're not yet subscribed on YouTube, even if you're listening on audio, jump over to YouTube and subscribe. If you are listening on audio, please do consider rating 5-star and make sure to check out next week. To reiterate, this is not the only episode for Game Week 4. I'll be recording next week with a guest, and it's a very, very good guest at that as well. So I'm excited for that. Thank you very much for watching and listening. And until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.